Well, welcome again to another Friday night. We're doing this in-depth look at the 60 characteristics of complex trauma, the tools that children usually develop to survive in a world of lack of safety. And then the very tools of survival become the things that make their life today have all kinds of problems. And so today we're going to come to trust issues. Last week we talked about control issues. Today I want to talk about trust issues. And it's just a massive issue for people from complex trauma. And I hope I can explain it in a way that maybe is a new perspective for you, but it just gives you a deeper understanding of why people from complex trauma have such trust issues, and then also give you tools for growing in this area. So let me begin with a definition. So trust is the belief that your partner, and I'm going to put it within an intimate relationship, is concerned about your well-being and acts with your best interest at heart. It's the belief that your partner keeps their promises. Trust serves as the foundation for a healthy relationship, and it allows partners to be vulnerable with each other and feel safe and secure with each other. So just to give you an idea of how big this issue is, let me give you 4 examples that I encounter regularly. So somebody might say to me, I was in a relationship while I was in the problem of addiction, and my partner cheated on me, but we're still in a relationship. Do you think we can work stuff out and have a healthy relationship, even though there's been that having an affair, cheating, as part of our experience? Very common question. Or, I'm just starting a relationship and I'm in recovery, and the person I'm with is so jealous all the time. They're always checking up on me, accusing me of seeing somebody else, playing mind games. Will this work? Or, I've relapsed quite a few times. And my relapses always involve telling lies, stealing, whatever. Now my family and my partner don't trust me and don't believe that I'm serious about recovery or that I'm changing. But I know I'm serious. But this is causing so much stress in our relationships because they don't trust me. Or, I know I need to develop new supports in my recovery, which means meeting people and coming to trust them. But I am afraid to trust anyone. I am afraid to build a healthy support network. Some of you can relate to all of those 4 scenarios, but it is a big issue. So somebody said this: what is the hardest thing to build? What is the easiest thing to destroy? And what is one of the most important things in relationships and life? Trust. Somebody said, tell a lie once and all your truths become unquestionable. All your truths become questionable. In other words, break trust and it is super hard to rebuild. You're now suspect forever afterwards. Somebody said it this way: breaking someone's trust is like crumpling up a perfect piece of paper. You can smooth it over, but it is never going to be the same again. Now let me give you a context for understanding this trust issue from the perspective of complex trauma. So for a review, complex trauma is not an event, but it's living in a prolonged period of time with multiple chronic repetitive stressors, okay? So somebody has said complex trauma is not a terrifying event, it's a terrifying life. A life that is not safe. So as you look at the chronic stressors, you find that they're largely, with complex trauma, they're largely relational. They're caused by the people closest to you. They're caused by the people that you are trusting to protect you, to care for you, to meet your needs. The people that a child naturally trusts to be safe, those are the ones that are creating the stressors. And so what you see about complex trauma is it's a profound relational betrayal and deception. You're being hurt by the people you're trusting and should be able to trust. They are lying to you, distorting reality, using you, hurting you. Now that would be okay once in a while, maybe you could handle that. But complex trauma is like being put in this swimming pool that is made up of, that you have to live in now, constantly living in the water of this swimming pool that is full of toxins. And these toxins are abandonment that you go through over and over and over, shame that is deepening and deepening, being lied to, having reality distorted, being used, being blamed, secrets, all kinds of lies. That's your environment, living in those toxins. And that overwhelms a child, trying to survive in that. So instead of using their psychological energy to learn and to thrive and be a child, all of their energy goes into survival and self-protection. And what they quickly realize is, I am being lied to. I am betrayed by the people that are supposed to love me, so don't trust anybody. If you can't trust the people who brought you in the world that you should be able to trust, then that means you can't trust anybody. And so trust is destroyed because of the intense betrayal that the child feels. But there's another piece to understand about children and the development of children. As we learn, we move from seeing and understanding things in concrete, and then we move to understanding abstract. So if you were to say to a 1-year-old, this is big, they don't understand the abstract concept of big until you show them a mountain, until you show them the ocean, until you let them see the starry skies at night. Then all of a sudden, that concrete big, they now get the concept of big. So we grow in learning from concrete to abstract. So what happens in complex trauma? You're learning by how they're treating you. So a parent can say to a child, I love you, but that's an abstract concept. What does that mean? So they learn it in the concrete. How does my parent treat me? That's the truth. That must be what love is. And so from that concrete experience, they gain this understanding of a concept that is abstract called love. And then how about their own, who am I? My identity, am I lovable or valuable? Parents can say you're valuable, but that's an abstract concept. They learn their value by how they're treated through concrete experiences. So, one of the tragedies of complex trauma is that the concrete experiences actually are lies. The concrete experience of how the parents treat the child, even though they say they love them, that how they treat them is not love. So the child is learning lies about love. Their value. The parent says they're valuable, but how the parent teaches them and treats them, their value is actually a lie. Because what they're being taught is they have no value. And so complex trauma takes the concrete learning stage and causes the child to learn lies. But then there's another piece to this. And that is, in complex trauma, the child gets stuck in the concrete stage. Because now what happens in their mind is, my experience of truth is to be trusted. Words can't be trusted. So they're not able to go and explore the concept of love. They're stuck in saying, my experience is the truth. And they can't move beyond that. Now that works itself out in a couple ways. So number one, a client that would come into Lift or React, and they would hear me teach about healthy, about love. And they go, I don't know if I can trust their words. I don't know if I can trust Tim's words because they contradict my experience. So I don't know who I can trust because I don't trust words. So that locks them into not being able to change even more. But then, if they start to get to know people and people say to them, you're a wonderful person, they go, no, that doesn't match my experience, so they must be lying to me. They must have an ulterior motive in saying that I'm a wonderful person. And so they're stuck in the concrete learning part of development, which means they can't grow, they can't heal, because they can't trust anything beyond their own experience. Another way to look at complex trauma is a small child who is so malleable, so impressionable, is gaslit by their parents. So they experience something and they go, wow, that hurt. You were unkind to me. And the parent says, no, you're just being selfish. It's your fault. The parent distorts reality, lies to the child, and the child goes, okay, my parents must be right, so I'll believe it. And they try to twist their brain to believe the distortion. That's being gaslit. So complex trauma is a long process where a child is gaslit repeatedly, and they don't trust their own perception. They don't trust their own thinking because they've been told over and over again that they have it wrong. And that makes them very susceptible to abusers down the road. And so what I want you to see is complex trauma destroys trust at many levels. You can't trust words, so you can't trust teachers. You can't trust your own thinking. You can't trust anybody to meet your needs. You can't trust help from others as being genuine. Trust is destroyed over and over. And complex trauma causes you to get stuck there. Because to grow means I'll have to risk trusting somebody else. And that seems like too great a risk, because to the child in complex trauma, that means I will get hurt again. Now here's the dilemma that comes out of complex trauma. The people that you hate from your childhood are the people you couldn't trust. The people who betrayed you and let you down and lied to you. But guess what? In order for you to survive all of that, you had to lie as well. You had to betray others, not keep promises. You became the people you hate. But more than that, now you seem to get attracted to people who are dishonest, people who will betray you. So you continue to get hurt because you find and are drawn to untrustworthy people. And it keeps reinforcing you can't trust people, and it keeps you stuck even more. Now, there's a couple other pieces of complex trauma and trust. If you've been abandoned, basically what your belief is that anybody that gets to know me will find out I'm not that great and will abandon me. So therefore, when I get in a relationship, I'm pretty sure they're going to abandon me, so that means I can't trust them. So now I have to control them if they're not going to abandon me. Or people that get to know me are going to find out my shame, and they're going to figure out they'd be better off with somebody else beside me, and they're going to leave. So I can't trust anybody I get in a relationship with because of my shame and abandonment issues. They're going to see it, and they're going to leave me. Now, I think a lot of people, as they think about trust, don't realize how easy it is to destroy trust for people. And so they can be in relationships today or parenting their children, and they could be doing things that are destroying trust in that relationship without them even being aware that they're eroding trust. So let me give you a list of things that destroy trust in a relationship. Whenever you talk behind my back about me, that threatens trust. Whenever you don't walk the talk, you're a hypocrite. Your behaviors don't match your words. That destroys trust. Whenever you refuse to accept responsibility for your actions, but you're always blaming other people for your problems, that erodes trust. When you cheat to win at anything, so winning, no matter what you have to do, is your priority, that causes me to lose some trust in you. When you throw other people under the bus so that you don't get in trouble or cover your own ass, that erodes trust. When you say I'm important to you, but you don't show it through your deeds, that erodes trust. When you only talk about yourself and you never ask questions about me and want to get to know me, I'm not sure I can trust you. When you gossip to me about others, I'm not sure I can trust you because I'm not sure what you're gossiping about me to others. When you attempt to manipulate me, I don't think I can trust you because you're manipulating. When you betray me in any fashion, that destroys trust. When you abandon me when I need you, that erodes trust. When you fail to follow through on promises, when you engage in lots of very secretive activities and you won't tell me what you're doing, that erodes trust. When you know you've done something wrong but you won't apologize, that erodes trust. When you are asking me for advice all the time but you never follow that advice, that erodes trust. When I share something very personal with you and you blab that, you betray my confidence, that destroys trust. When you never share yourself with me, you stay closed off when it comes to matters of the heart, that makes it difficult for me to trust you. When you are unpredictable emotionally, and you're explosive and have temper issues, and you don't manage your emotions well, that destroys trust. When you're impulsive and you buy things impulsively and do things impulsively that have bad consequences, that erodes trust. When you tell little white lies, they might not be whoppers, but they're still a lie, that destroys trust. When there's conflict and you turn on the person you're having conflict with, instead of resolving it, you turn it all on them, that destroys my trust. When you always put your desires ahead of mine, that erodes trust. When you consistently treat some people better than others, that causes me to have trouble trusting you. When you are a terrible money manager, that influences how much I trust you. When you're inconsistent and following through on what you say you're going to do, that erodes trust. When you have a sneaky hidden agenda all the time, you tell me you want to do something and we do it, but then I find out you really wanted to do something else. You just didn't want to tell me that part. That erodes trust. When I find that you're watching porn, that damages trust. How you respond when life gets stressful. Do you persevere or do you quit? Or how you respond when you're bored. Do you keep doing the right things or do you just go for instant gratification? Those affect how trustworthy I see you to be. If you're greedy and all you're about is getting what you want, that causes me to struggle with whether I can totally trust you. If you're lazy, a procrastinator, you make excuses all the time for not doing what you said you were going to do. You only do half a job. That erodes my ability to trust you. When you don't regulate your emotions very well, that makes you untrustworthy. When you have poor boundaries, you're afraid to say no to people, or you don't respect other people's boundaries, or you say yes and then you back out, that causes me to struggle to trust you. When you live by a double standard, so it's all right for you to do one thing but not others, that affects trust. And when you change when you're with certain people and aren't a consistent, authentic person, that affects my ability to trust you. So that's 36 things that erode trust. How did you do on that? Because to me, it's so important to see is trust is so important, but we can be damaging it in very subtle ways, but the damage over time is horrendous. Now, somebody has developed what they call the stages of distrust. And they say there's 5 stages when you come to distrust a person. So you don't go from trusting to distrusting in one day, basically, for most people. So you begin with the doubt stage. And what that means is you're with this person and something's just bugging you. Something's not right. There's a red flag. Something's off. You can't quite put your finger on it, but something's there. Now, for many of us, we tend to, at this stage, give people the benefit of the doubt. Well, it just must be me. So we don't really start to think seriously that this is an untrustworthy person. But it can niggle and niggle away at us. And then over time, it goes to the next stage, suspicion. And what that begins to be is, okay, I know something's off here. Something's wrong. This person's not being totally trustworthy or honest, have integrity. I can't prove what it is, but I know something is not right. So now I'm starting to feel I can't trust them. So that leads to the next stage, anxiety. So now when I'm with this person, I now have an uneasiness. I feel an anxiety because what do I share with them? Can I trust them? And so there's an awkwardness that comes in, and you can feel that. In your physical symptoms, you might get a knot in your stomach or your heartbeat is going up. And then that leads to the next stage, which is they call fear. But now you're at a point where you go, okay, this person is not trustworthy, but I'm still in a relationship with them, but I'm afraid to be real. I'm afraid to be honest. I'm afraid to share with them. I'm afraid to open my heart to them. So now the relationship is not controlled by love, openness, safety. The relationship is now controlled by fear that you're going to get hurt in this relationship. And so that goes to the 5th area, self-protection, which is, okay, if I'm going to still be in a relationship with this person, I now have to protect myself. And so there's things that people do to protect themselves, and that you can withdraw. So instead of spending time with that person, you stay away from them as much as possible. Instead of sharing with them, you talk about superficial topics. You withdraw from intimacy. geographically and in what you share. Others, when they're with that person, instead of connecting, they just stay busy all the time. So they move to a task-oriented approach when they're with that person. So it's not about connecting, it's just about staying distracted. And for many people, once trust is broken, if they come from complex trauma, it triggers something so deep in them that they go to bad behaviors. People who have had their trust broken, they can go and relapse into drugs and alcohol. They can go on an eating binge or other addictive behaviors, self-harm, etc. But the pain emotionally is so great from having their trust betrayed that they act out, they try to numb it, they try to hurt themselves. It's a very sad thing. Then moving forward, for some, it's okay, from now on, when I get in a relationship, I can't be vulnerable again to trusting somebody and then having that trust broken. So I will go into relationships always as the giver. People can share with me, people can tell me all kinds of stuff, and I'll help them, but I'm not going to share myself with them. So I will now change how I go about relationships. And that is what codependent relationships often look like. I will help you, but I will not connect and be open totally with you. And you start this dance of trying to have fake connection and being together and helping each other without true healthy intimacy. So, trust is a big issue. It shows up in all kinds of ways. It's a process of moving from trust to distrust. But how do we become trustworthy? So before we go to how do I learn to trust others again, I want us to start where I think the focus needs to be, and that is, how do I become trustworthy? That's where I have to start. And so understand this. If you have broken somebody else's trust, it could take years before they trust you again. You have to accept that. If you try to pressure them to trust you quicker, you're going to do more damage. You have to accept the consequence of the behaviors that you have done that have destroyed trust, that it takes a long time to rebuild trust, even though it's very easy to destroy. So, most people in early recovery from addiction struggle with the frustration that the people closest to them don't trust them. And they know they're sincere this time. They know they're changing. They want people to start trusting them, but people are saying, well, I got to see you consistently doing the right thing for a year at least before I'm going to feel I can trust you. And they don't like that. So, you have to accept the slowness of the process. And that is very hard to do. Okay. To be a trustworthy person means you're a safe person. And that means you operate out of a core of love. So what violates love? Lying, breaking promises, hurting people, stealing, cheating. So love is the opposite. It is the things that make trust. It is the things that make you trustworthy. But the child brain, the limbic brain, is what makes people untrustworthy because they go with how they're feeling. That's what runs their life. So to become trustworthy, to have good character or character that is shaped by love, you have to operate out of your cortex. And that means I want to treat people the right way, even if I don't feel like it. I want to be a good parent for my kids, not just on days I feel like being a good parent, but on days I'm tired, on days I'm a bit depressed. I will show up and keep my promises and be loving even when I don't feel like it. So the cortex has to manage, be in the driver's seat over the limbic brain. And so take that another way. That means that you live by good internal boundaries. You say, I will always treat people with respect. I will keep my promises. I will be honest. Those are your internal boundaries. And you stick to them regardless of how you're feeling or what the circumstances are. That's a trustworthy person. Now, for many people who have complex trauma, they've lived in their limbic brain for so many years that they don't have good internal boundaries. They just do what they feel like on any given day. So to develop good internal boundaries is quite a chore for them. For some, it's helpful to have somebody else in their life they're accountable to. So I'm going to eat healthy today. I'm going to exercise today. I'm not going to look at porn today. I want to be accountable to you in these areas. And that can help build the character, the internal boundaries that will make you a trustworthy person. So another way to say that is, in order for you to have a good relationship, you have to become a trustworthy person. But let me take it further. In order for you to have a good relationship, both people have to be trustworthy. And so what we often encourage people to do is to not get into a romantic relationship too quickly. Because what happens is that when you get into a romantic relationship, it triggers your deep trust fears that come out of shame and abandonment. So will this person leave me? Will they find somebody better than me? As they start to get to know me, are they going to say, oh, what a loser? And so that can bring about control problems. That can bring about jealousy issues. And that can do a ton of damage. And so don't enter into a romantic relationship until there's been some healing around your shame, your abandonment, and your trust. Because if you get there too soon, you won't be able to handle the pressures that come from the triggers of being in an intimate relationship. Okay, final question. How do I trust again? So I've had other people who have let me down, or I come out of complex trauma and I just don't trust anybody. And I know I need to start finding safe, healthy people that I build trust relationships with it, but I just don't trust. So let me say this. Some people go to, I'll trust you totally, or I don't trust you at all. One or the other. So what I want you to understand is, let's get out of that all or nothing, and let's understand that trust builds gradually. And it builds on, I get to know you. You prove to be trustworthy in little things. Okay, I'll trust you for a bit more. I'll trust you for a bit more. And so it starts with the cortex saying, trust is built on, not on my feelings of it. I think I can trust this person. Trust is built on evidence. Are they trustworthy? Do they have character shaped by love? I am looking for evidence of that. And if I see evidence that they're trustworthy, then I will trust them a little bit. So trust is not based on feeling. It's based on the cortex finding evidence that the person is trustworthy. Now, I got to add one thing. So let's say you find somebody and you study them. And you go, I think that's a trustworthy person. And you study them over quite a few months. Now you have to make a choice to trust them. So what happens the first time you say, I'm going to trust this person? You feel all this anxiety and fear. Are they going to let me down? Are they going to let me down? Another way to say that is you're trusting them, but you don't have a lot of confidence. that they're going to follow through. But the more you trust them and the more they follow through, the greater your confidence is that they're trustworthy. So trust and confidence are connected, but they're different. So what happens in the beginning is I choose to trust somebody who proves to be or looks like there's evidence that they're trustworthy, but my confidence is really small, almost non-existent. But as they continue to prove to be trustworthy, my confidence grows until I have great confidence and great trust in them. Well, that's the end of part 1. I hope all of this trust stuff is helpful for you. It's such an important issue. If people are going to make it, they have to become trustworthy and be able to trust one or two people. We're going to take a short break and then I'm going to come back for the Christian part. If that doesn't interest you, we're not offended by that. You're free to go. We look forward to seeing you again next Friday. For everybody else, I'll be back in a minute. Well, welcome back. We've been looking at the life of Peter, and today we've been talking about trust. And so I wanted to talk about trust within the context of Peter's life. And I want to focus not just on trusting others, but trusting God. God made us as human beings that we need trust in order to be healthy. So a child needs to trust safe, healthy people, parents, if they're going to grow to become a healthy adult. God made us to need Him so that we would trust Him for help, for guidance, etc. So we were made to trust. For people from complex trauma, trusting God is extremely difficult. And I don't judge people for that. There's no condemnation in that. That's just the reality. Their trust has been shattered in so many ways that trusting God is very difficult. But sometimes it's made worse by the fact that while they were younger, so a child who's sexually abused or who dad's beating up mama all the time, they prayed and asked God to stop it. But it didn't stop. And they went, how can I trust this God? He doesn't protect His people. I thought He loved me. Or sometimes today when they're in different situations that are very difficult, they pray and beg God to work, to intervene, to help. Sometimes God does, sometimes He doesn't. It seems like God's unpredictable, like God's inconsistent. And so it's just like, can I fully trust this God or not? And it is a huge issue for many people from complex trauma. And so what I want you to understand, it was a big issue for Peter too. The area that he receives the greatest number of rebukes is in the area of his lack of faith, his lack of trust. Jesus regularly said, why don't you trust me? Both to Peter and to the other disciples. Oh, you of little faith, He called them. So let me give you a couple things. In Matthew 8, we read of Jesus and the disciples going across the Sea of Galilee in a boat, and a storm comes up. And Jesus is exhausted and He's sleeping in the front of the boat, and the waves are growing and the disciples are trying to row to the other side, but they can't. The storm is just too much and they start to become afraid. And these are experienced fishermen becoming afraid that they're going to drown. And so they wake Jesus up and they say, don't you care that we're going to perish? And Jesus responds and he says, "Why are you afraid, O you of little faith?" And the reality is that Jesus had said, he had promised to them, we're going to get to the other side of the lake. But in the middle of that storm, they forgot about the promise, or they didn't think God could pull the promise off because the circumstances seemed so terrible, and they doubted and they didn't trust, and fear took over. And so that was a regular thing with Jesus and the disciples. Now, by the time we get to Matthew 13, we see a little bit of progress in Peter, but it's important to understand Peter's a lot like us. And I'm glad we have this story. So it's another storm on the Sea of Galilee. Jesus isn't in the boat this time. He was off by himself on the shore praying. And as this storm develops, again, the disciples are afraid that they're going to die because the waves are so big, the storm is so terrible. And all of a sudden they see Jesus walking on the water towards them. And Peter, in a moment of faith, says, wow, if Jesus can walk on the water, then that means he can make it so I can walk on the water. So he says, Jesus, just ask me to come to you so I can walk on the water too. And Jesus says, come on, Peter. And Peter starts walking on the water. And I imagine he just felt, wow, this Jesus is great. I trusted him. Look at what happened. But then he saw the waves. And all of a sudden, the waves became bigger in his thinking than the promise of Jesus. And he started to doubt and he started to sink. And Jesus said, why did you doubt me, Peter? But what I want you to see from that is Peter's like us. There's moments when we shine with faith, and there's moments when we are terrible failures and we don't trust. And that tends to be what normally happens in the followers of Jesus. Some days where our faith is good, other days it is struggling. Jesus wants us to grow in faith, but he's not putting us down in a harsh, cruel way that we're struggling to trust him at times. Now I want to go ahead a year or so in Peter's life. Jesus has gone back to heaven. Peter has become the main leader in the church, the followers of Jesus. The religious leaders don't like this new church because it's threatening to overthrow the existing religion. And so they arrest Peter and they put him in jail and are planning to kill him. Now you would think Peter would be full of fear and anxiety. I'm going to get killed tomorrow. I'm in this jail cell chained to 2 guards. There's no way of escape. Everything is looking terrible. My future is looking terrible. And you would think Peter wouldn't be able to sleep a wink that night because of all the worry and fear and anxiety. And what we find in Acts 12 is that night before Peter was to be placed on trial, he was asleep, fastened with 2 chains between 2 soldiers. What had happened in Peter is he said, God, I just trust you with my life. So I'm not going to worry about tomorrow. Whatever you have planned, I accept. I'm going to have a good sleep. Peter's faith had grown. Now, there's 2 things I think that just complicate our ability to trust God. Number 1, God's wisdom is not our wisdom. God sees all of history at once. He sees a much bigger perspective on what is happening around us than we do. Think of yourself as driving a narrow mountain windy road with cliffs on each side of the road. And all you can see is the truck in front of you that is going so slow. And you would like to get around and pass the truck. But the road curves so much you can't see what's coming. But there's a helicopter up in the sky that has this big perspective. And they radio down to you and they say, pass, because it's clear. And you go, I don't know if I can trust. I don't know if I can trust. Because your perspective is so limited. And you think that you can only trust your perspective. And so God's perspective, being so different from ours, makes it difficult at times to know if we can trust him, especially when bad things come. We think, what are you doing, God? And maybe he's actually part of making something wonderful happen, but we can't see that perspective. And then there's another aspect of God. He's got great power, but he doesn't take people's free will away. He doesn't stop that abuser from hurting the child. And you go, why not, God? And God says, as soon as I take free will away, then people will just be robots who can't choose love between choosing good or evil. Love has only got value if I can choose not to love. And if I'm tempted not to love, but I still choose love, then love has meaning. But if you take my free will away and just make me love every time, then the world has no meaning. And so now God is in heaven, the king, but he's not going to interfere or intervene in every bad thing that is happening. And that is frustrating for us. And so I've asked myself, what does faith look like? A lot of people would teach today that faith is this power I can possess to get God to do what I want. So I say, God, I claim that you're going to make this happen. I trust you for it. And somehow my faith forces God or manipulates God to do what I want. And I go, no, that's not healthy. That's a complex trauma manipulation world. So what is faith? I love the story of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's praying to his Father and he says, Father, I know you want me to drink a cup of sorrow and suffering in the next few hours. Please take it away. I don't want to drink that cup. It's going to be so difficult. Here's my will, but I trust your will. I trust myself to you. So that if your will means I drink it, even though that's not what I naturally want, I'm okay with that. So trust is I surrender to you, God. I just want your will. I trust my life to you. I let go of trying to force my will. That's the trust. And so as I face situations that are very difficult, part of me says, God, I want you to do this. I want this to work out this way. But I have to come to a place where I go, God, I just surrender. I trust. Romans 8:28 says, we know that God works all things together for good to those who love him. Now, some people have mistakenly understood that to mean that if you love God, he'll make everything in your life a success story. He'll make everything a happy ending. He'll take pain away. He'll take hardship away and make an easy life for you. But that verse isn't saying that. There's two things. What it is saying is God is at work in everything. So there's nothing happening in our world, no matter how evil, that God is somehow going to be working in those circumstances. And then, through every circumstance I go through, he's working in my life, not to just make it turn out the way I want, but it says to make me more like Jesus. His goal is not just a happy ending of an easy life. His goal is the happy ending of me becoming more like Jesus. And so that is how he's working the stuff in my life to build the character of Jesus in me. And so when bad things are happening, what I can say is, God, I'm trusting you in these circumstances, knowing you're going to turn it into good by making me grow to become more like Jesus through this. And that's the ideal blessing I should want and that God can give. To make me healthier. To make me better character. So faith in God is a very challenging thing for people from complex trauma. But I hope At its very root, you'll get this point. It's surrender. It's turning my life over, knowing that your plan, your desire for me is good. And so even if bad stuff is happening, I'm trusting that somehow you are going to help me grow, get through this, and positive change in my life to make me more like Jesus. Let's pray. Father, it's easy to talk about trust, but it's very hard to implement trust in our life. And so I just pray that you would help us, every person here, to grow in this area. We know for Peter it was a long road. It took a long time to develop a deep faith in you, and I just pray you'll keep us growing in this area. Amen. Well, thank you so much for being part of our evening. Again, it's my pleasure to be able to share this time with you, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Good night.